Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The blade didn't tremble in my hand, but the soul inside my chest did. I stood over him, the shadow of my dagger cutting across the sleeping face of the Empire's most feared warlord, and for a fleeting second, I wondered if the gods were laughing at the irony of an assassin who hesitated. He looked almost human in the moonlight, stripped of the black iron armor that had earned him the title, the Butcher of Osiris. His breathing slow, deep, and terrifyingly calm. I tightened my grip on the hilt, my knuckles turning white, willing my alpha instincts to override the sickeningly sweet, artificial omega pheromones I had drenched myself in for weeks. Just as I shifted my weight to drive the steel into his heart, his eyes snapped open, molten gold in the darkness, and before I could exhale, my wrist was crushed in a vice grip. My back hit the silk sheets with a bone-rattling thud, and the man I was meant to kill was straddling me, his thumb pressing dangerously against my carotid artery. "You possess a heavy tread for a delicate omega, little prince," General Kalen Varric rumbled, his voice a low vibration that shuddered through my ribcage. Or should I ask, what exactly have I married? To understand how I ended up pinned beneath the enemy general on my wedding night, you must understand the desperation of a dying kingdom. My name is Julian, the third prince of Ethelgard, and for 24 years, I was the pride of my lineage, a dominant alpha born to lead armies. But Ethelgard fell. The walls crumbled under the might of the Osiris Empire, and to save the remnants of my people from total annihilation, a treaty was struck. The terms were simple, a marriage alliance. The Emperor of Osiris demanded our finest omega to wed his most ruthless commander, General Varric, to ensure our submission. The problem? We had no royal omegas left. The plague had taken my sister 3 winters ago. The council argued, wept, and panicked. Sending a commoner would be an insult punishable by genocide. We were cornered. It was the Grand Vizier who looked at me, his eyes lingering on my build, leaner than most alphas, wiry and graceful rather than broad and hulking, and suggested the unthinkable. "The drug is called lullaby," the alchemist had whispered, handing me a vial of viscous, violet liquid. "It destroys alpha pheromones. It shrinks the pheromone gland, induces a false heat, and softens the muscle density. It is agonizing. It is poison, but it will make you smell like the sweetest omega in existence." "And if I am discovered?" I had asked, watching the liquid swirl. "General Varric does not take prisoners, my prince. He breaks them." So, I drank the poison. I let them bind me in silks and paint my face. I suppressed the roar of the alpha within me until it was nothing but a whimper behind a wall of agony. I walked down the aisle of the obsidian cathedral, my scent masking the truth with notes of jasmine and honey, and I pledged my life to the monster who had burned my cities. But I did not intend to be a husband. I intended to be a widow. The general's manor was a fortress of stone and cold iron, devoid of warmth, much like the man himself. Kalen Varric was a towering figure, radiating a prime alpha aura so potent it made weaker men fall to their knees. He was handsome in a brutal, jagged way, sharp jaw, scarred brow, and eyes that seemed to dissect everything they looked upon. For 3 days after the wedding, he did not touch me. This was the first crack in my plan. I had anticipated a brute who would force himself on his spoil of war, giving me the proximity to strike. Instead, Varric treated me with a distant, terrifying courtesy. He watched me across the long dining table, his gaze lingering on my hands, my neck, the way I held my utensil. "You do not eat much, Julian," he observed on the 3rd night. The fire in the hearth cast dancing shadows across his scarred cheek. "I have no appetite in a prison," I replied, keeping my voice soft, pitching it up to match the omega persona. Varric took a sip of wine, his eyes never leaving mine. "Is it a prison? You are free to roam the grounds. You have servants at your beck and call. You wear the crest of Varric. I wear the chains of a conqueror." He smiled then, a small, dangerous quirk of the lips. "Spirited. I was told Ethelgardian omegas were docile. It seems the reports were lacking." He stood up, the chair scraping against the stone floor, and walked toward me. My alpha instincts screamed at me to stand, to square my shoulders, to challenge the approaching threat. It took every ounce of discipline to remain seated, to lower my eyes submissively. Varric stopped behind my chair. He leaned down, his nose grazing the curve of my neck, inhaling deeply. I froze. The scent blockers were strong, but up close, against a prime alpha? It was a gamble. Jasmine, he murmured, his breath hot against my skin. Honey. And something else. My heart hammered against my ribs. My lord. Iron, he whispered. You smell like blood and iron beneath the flowers, Julian. He pulled away before I could respond, walking to the door. Rest well, wife. Tomorrow, I will show you the training yards. I think you might find them nostalgic. The training yards were a mistake. I knew at the moment he led me there. The clash of steel, the scent of sweat and aggression, it woke something in my blood that the lullaby drug tried to suppress. Varric stood by the fence, watching his lieutenant spar. He wore simple training leathers that clung to his broad shoulders. Do you fence, Julian? Omegas in my country are taught music and poetry, General. I lied, clutching my silk sleeves. A pity. He signaled to a soldier, who tossed him a wooden practice sword. Varric caught it without looking. Because you walk like a swordsman. You balance your weight on the balls of your feet. You track movement not with fear, but with calculation. He pointed the wooden blade at me. Humor me. I cannot. I insist. The challenge in his voice was undeniable. It wasn't a request. It was a command from an alpha to his mate. To refuse would be suspicious. To accept would be dangerous. I took the wooden sword he offered. It felt heavy, familiar, and right. First blood wins, Varric said, dropping into a stance that was technically perfect. I tried to be clumsy. I tried to swing wide, to feign weakness. I swung the sword like a garden tool, stumbling forward. Varric parried effortlessly, a bored expression on his face. Stop acting, he barked, his voice cracking like a whip. Strike me. He lunged. It was a fast strike, aimed at my shoulder. Pure instinct took over. The lullaby made me slower, weaker, but the muscle memory of 20 years of royal combat training didn't vanish. I didn't stumble. I pivoted. I parried his strike, the wood clacking loudly, and riposted with a thrust toward his ribs. Varric blocked it, his eyes widening in surprise, then delight. He pressed the attack, faster now. Asterisk clack. Clack. Thud. Asterisk. We moved across the dirt ring, the dance of violence escalating. I forgot the disguise. I forgot the mission. For a moment, I was Prince Julian again, fighting a worthy adversary. I ducked a high swing, swept his leg. He jumped over it, and I drove my shoulder into his chest to create distance. We broke apart, both breathing heavy. The entire training yard had gone silent. Soldiers stared, mouths agape, at the delicate Omega, who had just gone toe-to-toe with the god of war. Realization crashed over me like ice water. I dropped the sword, my hands shaking. Varric stared at me, his chest heaving, a sheen of sweat on his skin. He didn't look angry. He looked ravenous. Music and poetry, he mocked softly, stepping closer. You play a dangerous tune, Julian. I watched my brothers train. I stammered, backing away. You lie as beautifully as you fight. He reached out, grabbing my chin, tilting my face up. Who are you really? I am your husband, I whispered. We shall see. That night was when I tried to kill him. And that brings us back to the knife at his throat, and me pinned beneath him. You possess a heavy tread for a delicate Omega, he had said. I struggled against his grip, but he was immense. An alpha in his prime, uninhibited by drugs. Let me go, I snarled, dropping the falsetto. My natural voice was deeper, rougher. Varric's eyes narrowed. He looked at the dagger on the floor, then back at me. An assassin. I expected that. The Emperor has many enemies. But an assassin who fights like a general and smells like. He leaned down, inhaling the crook of my neck again, forcefully this time. The exertion of the fight, the stress, and the missed dose of lullaby earlier that evening. It was causing the mask to slip. My natural scent, a sharp, cold aroma of cedar and ozone, was beginning to bleed through the jasmine. Varric froze. His pupils dilated, swallowing the gold irises. Alpha, he breathed, the word a curse and a prayer. He ripped the silk shirt of my sleeping tunic open. There, on my chest, faint but visible, were the scars of my presentation, the marks of an alpha's growth. You are a male alpha, Varric said, his voice dangerously quiet. disguised as a female Omega. To marry me. To kill you. I spat, stopping the struggle. There was no point now. I glared up at him with all the hatred I had carried for 3 years. To free my people from your tyranny. I expected him to snap my neck. I expected him to call the guards and have me flayed in the courtyard. Instead, Varric threw his head back and laughed. It was a dark, rich sound that echoed off the stone walls. The Ethelgardians sent a prince to do a whore's job, he said, looking down at me with a terrifying intensity. And you submitted. You took suppressants. You mutilated your own biology to get close to me. I did what was necessary. Did you? Varric lowered his weight, pressing me into the mattress. The dynamic shifted. This wasn't just physical dominance anymore. He was flaring his pheromones, a crushing wave of dark chocolate, burnt wood, and pure power. It was meant to make an alpha submit, to challenge for territory. My instincts roared to fight back, but the lullaby weakened me. I gasped, my body trembling under the sensory assault. Why use such a complex method? Varric asked, his face inches from mine. Why not disguise yourself as a beta servant? A guard? Because you don't let guards into your bedchamber. I gritted out, fighting the urge to bare my throat. A submissive reflex I hated. Only a spouse could get close enough to a paranoid monster like you. True, he conceded. I am paranoid. And yet, here you are. Alive. He released my wrist. I grabbed for the dagger, but he kicked it away before I could blink. Do it, I challenged him. Kill me. End the line of Ethelgard. Varric sat back on his heels, straddling my hips, looking at me with a contemplative expression. You think I want to kill you? Ethelgard is a broken province. If I kill you, they rebel out of martyrdom. If I send you back, they rebel out of shame. Then what? You stay, he said simply. I will try to kill you again. I count on it. He leaned forward, his hand tracing the line of my jaw, his thumb brushing my lower lip. The touch was electric, confusing. I have spent my life surrounded by sycophants and terrified weaklings. I have an emperor who fears me and soldiers who worship me. But I have no equal. He looked deep into my eyes. You are an alpha, Julian. A broken, drugged, desperate alpha. But you have fire. I will not kill you. I will break you. I will strip away this disguise, flush that poison from your veins, and see what you truly are when you are at your full strength. And then, if you can defeat me, you can have your freedom. But until then, you are mine. The weeks that followed were a blur of agony and confusion. Varric confiscated the lullaby. Withdrawal was a nightmare. I spent days shivering in a fever, my body purging the toxins, my bones aching as my muscles began to redensify. Varric tended to me himself. It was maddening. He was the enemy. He was the goal. But when I was retching into a bucket, he held my hair. When I was shivering so hard my teeth rattled, he stripped and climbed into the bed, using his immense body heat to warm me. Why? I asked one night, weak and delirious. Why help me? Because you are an investment, he murmured against my ear. But his scent wasn't aggressive. It was comforting. It was protective. As my strength returned, so did the training. But it wasn't training anymore. It was war. Every morning, we went to the private courtyard. We fought with wooden swords, then blunted steel. He didn't hold back. He battered me, bruised me, forced me to find the warrior I had buried. And every time he knocked me down, he offered a hand to pull me up. The dynamic between us shifted. The servants whispered. They didn't understand why the general sparred with his wife. They didn't understand why the wife grew broader, sharper, more dangerous every day. We were two alphas circling each other. But the hatred was changing into something else. Respect. Adrenaline. Lust. It came to a head on the night of the solstice banquet. The emperor had arrived to inspect his general and the new prize. I had to play the part of the Omega one last time. I wore the robes, I softened my posture, but I refused the suppressants. I relied on perfume and will alone. The emperor was a vile, rotund man who smelled of rot and excess. He sat on Varric's throne, looking at me with greasy eyes. So this is the Ethelgardian beauty, the emperor sneered. Come here, boy. Let me see what my general has been hiding. I glanced at Varric. He stood by the pillar, his face a stone mask, but his hand rested on the pommel of his sword. His knuckles were white. I walked toward the emperor. Kneel, the emperor commanded. I hesitated. My alpha pride screamed. I said, "Kneel." The emperor struck me across the face. The ring on his finger cut my cheek. The silence in the hall was deafening. Blood trickled down my face. I tasted copper. I looked up, my eyes locking with the emperor's. I didn't see a king. I saw prey. The growl started low in my chest, involuntary, a rumble that no Omega could ever produce. The emperor froze. What? Suddenly, the air in the room grew heavy, suffocating. A wave of pheromones hit the hall like a physical blow, pure, unadulterated dominance. It wasn't me. It was Varric. "You touched him," Varric said. His voice was soft, but it carried to every corner of the room. "General," the emperor stammered. She disrespected me." Varric walked forward. The guard stepped back, terrified. He moved like a predator, fluid and lethal. He stopped between me and the emperor. "He is not she, your majesty," Varric said calmly. "And he does not kneel. What is the meaning of this treason?" the emperor shrieked. Varric turned to me. He looked at the blood on my cheek, and his eyes darkened to a terrifying pitch black. He reached out, wiping the blood away with his thumb, then licked it off. "He is my partner," Varric declared, turning back to the court. "He is an alpha of Ethelgard, and you have drawn his blood." Varric drew his sword. The sound of steel ringing filled the hall. "General, you would strike your emperor?" "I serve strength," Varric growled. "You have none." The chaos that erupted was absolute. The emperor's guards charged. Varric didn't flinch. He looked at me, a wild, feral grin on his face. "Well, Prince Julian," he shouted over the din. "You wanted to overthrow the tyranny. Are you going to watch, or are you going to fight?" I reached for the sword of a fallen guard. The weight of the steel felt like coming home. I stood back to back with the man I had sworn to kill. My scent, cedar and ozone, mixed with his, burnt wood and blood, creating a storm that filled the room. "I hate you," I said, parrying a spear thrust aimed at Varric's blind side. "Liar." Varric laughed, cutting down two men in a single stroke. "You love the thrill." We moved as one. It was a dance of death, two alphas perfectly synchronized, protecting each other's backs. We weren't husband and wife. We weren't master and servant. We were a pack of two. When the dust settled, the emperor fled, his reign crumbling as his army saw their general turn against him. We stood amidst the wreckage of the banquet hall, breathing hard, covered in blood that wasn't ours. Varric turned to me. The adrenaline was high, the lust palpable. He grabbed the lapels of my bloodied tunic and slammed me against the wall. "You fought well," he rasped. "You started a civil war," I replied, breathless. "I started a dynasty." He leaned in, his forehead resting against mine. "No more disguises, Julian. No more lies. Rule with me. Not as an Omega, but as my equal. As my king." I looked at the man who had been my enemy. I saw the darkness in him, yes, but I also saw the loyalty. I saw the only man in the world strong enough to handle me. I dropped my sword. I grabbed him by the back of his neck and pulled him down. "And if I try to kill you again?" I whispered against his lips. "Then make sure you don't miss," Varric growled and crushed his mouth to mine. And that is how the viper tamed the wolf. If you enjoyed seeing Julian take control of his destiny, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a husband who conquered your kingdom if he handed you an empire in return? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then, prompt image. Prompt. Masterpiece. Best quality. High res. 1.2. Korean manhwa style. Semi-realistic. Digital art. 2 men. BL. Yaoi. Man 1. General Varric. Tall. Broad shoulders. Black armor. Scarred face. Glowing gold eyes. Intense expression. Dominant pose. Short dark hair. Man 2. Prince Julian. Slender but muscular alpha. Holding a dagger. Silver hair. Piercing blue eyes. Wearing torn silk wedding robes. Defiant expression. Pressed against a stone wall. Intense romantic tension. Knife at throat. Dramatic moonlight. Dark stone castle bedroom background. Floating feathers. Cinematic lighting. Sharp focus. Intricate details.